Happy St. Patrick's Day. I didn't have my wife to remind me, so I am not appropriately attired, although I acknowledge my Irish roots. So those of you who enjoy the Irish heritage, I join you. It is the 17th of March. This is the Senate Committee on Ethics, and I'd like to call it to order. I note that we have a presence of a quorum. We have others I know that are in the area, and they're going to be joining us shortly, but I'd like to ask you to join me for an invocation. Father, we're grateful for challenges, and we seek your wisdom and your guidance. Lord, we know there's no perfect answer except from you. And as frail humans, we will fall short, but we will try our best to do what is appropriate and right and proper for the people of Georgia. Bless us proceedings this morning. Help us to understand the input that we receive and to take it to our hearts and share it with our colleagues and act in the best interest of Georgia. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. We're here this morning to continue to take input on House Bill 531. It's on the table, so I need a motion to take it off the table. I have a motion from Senator Hatchett, second from the leader. Without objection, we will take 531 off the table for additional testimony from our witnesses. If you have not had a chance to sign up, please do so. If you'd like to share your input, we're happy to receive it. Anyone else? Those of you who were with us yesterday heard a couple of hours of good input. We expect to receive more today. So we're going to begin with Katie Stamper. Is that correct? Yes. Ms. Stamper, please join us.
Yes, I legally changed my name to make it easier to pronounce.
You are too kind. You are too kind, and I apologize for mispronouncing names in advance.
Hi, I'm Katie Stamper. I'm a lawyer in Woodstock. I ran for House in 1990 as a Libertarian. I had a handout for y'all. It's the 1982 DNC versus RNC consent decree, and also attached to it at the back is the 2018 order from a judge appointed by Jimmy Carter Barack Obama, that ended that consent decree. That consent decree prohibited the RNC from engaging in ballot security measures. So from the time of Ronald Reagan until a few years ago, the RNC, including the state parties, could not engage in protecting the ballot. It's very important to understand. We also had in 82 the motor voter law. So we have had a concerted effort to continually degrade the security of those who can vote. And this has been going on since Ronald Reagan got shot. So what we've done is we have arranged for the dog to be left with the pizzas. And we saw the results of that in spades in December and November and January. Our election issues were completely unaddressed by concurrent procedures. Georgians were distressed, were angered, we're frustrated, and we can't believe it. Although we should, because this decree's been in effect. It was in effect for so long. So we need a change in our election contest statutes. I haven't seen anything to that. And also our courts told us that we had no standing, which was outrageous. Now looking at specifically the bill that you're discussing today, it allows I also want to say we need paper ballots. The Dominion voting is unacceptable. Any electronic voting is unacceptable because it's too easy to manipulate and you can't see it. You can't verify it. You just have to trust people. I don't trust anybody. I'm a lawyer. I don't trust anybody. So this bill provides for 2 poll watchers. I find that to be insufficient. There should be 1 GOP and 1 Dem poll watcher for every employee at the polling stations everywhere. They should be wearing body cameras, just like the police. We're deciding who's going to spend trillions of dollars and decide who comes into our country and what kind of culture we have. We deserve to know what the heck is going on. We have ballots that are found, and we don't know why they're found later. It's just ridiculous. We know there's going to be an election. Okay, I do support the part of the bill that says there should be no private funding. That's obvious. Zuckerberg gave money because he wanted cheap labor, and he got it. We spend a lot of money on just credit card charges. We can afford to spend money on ballot security. I oppose any ballot boxes whatsoever. This is letting the camel get its nose into the tent. You have one ballot box, then the next time it's going to be 3 ballot boxes, and it's going to be 40 ballot boxes. Nobody can check it. Remember, shoplifters. Shoplifters do sleight of hand. You put a ballot box even inside, somebody turns their back, they stash 20 of them in there. Totally unacceptable. No to early scanning. If you have early scanning, somebody is going to be very tempted to reveal that information. Sure. Thank you very much. I oppose, and I was very sickened to hear all the foreigners come in yesterday and tell us how we ought to accommodate them on voting. Guys, it's a long bill. Some of it's good, some of it's bad.
No, yes, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, sure.
I had to read it, I know.
Thank you. Our next witness is Charlie Miller. Again, what we're trying to do this morning is take testimony from a number of individuals, and we'll limit testimony to about 3 minutes. But we're happy to receive your input. Mr. Miller?
Chairman
Oh, I'm
Burns.
sorry. You're welcome to use that one right there.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Chairman Burns, did this gentleman go through security before he came in?
I suspect that he did.
I rolled right through.
I mean, what did I say? I think they might have recognized it. Thank you, Mr. Miller. We appreciate you coming back. Mr. Miller was here yesterday, but had to leave because of some transportation issues, and he was gracious enough to get up this morning and come back. So we're welcome.
Well, actually, Mr. Chairman, I prefer the early mornings over the late nights because I'm an early riser and I'm early to bed, so I appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, senators of this committee, thank y'all for having us today. My name is Charlie Miller. I'm the Legislative Advocacy Director at the Georgia Council of Developmental Disabilities. I'm here to address the concerns regarding the potential impact of House Bill 531 on the disability community. As many people with disabilities have chosen to vote by mail as a method to address accessibility and transportation barriers that are often present within in-person voting, almost 75% of people with disabilities use this type of voting in the 2020 election, and we want to discuss 2 main topics: voter ID requirement and drop box limitations. Voter ID requirement requires a Georgia ID to request a absentee ballot has the potential to disproportionately impact the disability community, as many people with disabilities do not have a driver's license and are approximately 2 times less likely to have a state-issued ID compared to voters without disabilities. Issues with transportation and costs associated with obtaining the state-issued IDs are 2 barriers that may make getting an ID more difficult for folks with disabilities. The disability community was also able to more easily engage in voting processes through the use of drop box locations. These secure boxes allow people with disabilities to return their absentee ballots without the added complexity of a post office visit, the cost of postage, and numerous without the added complexity of a post office visit. The cost of postage, numerous availability of locational boxes assist with removing some of these barriers for a physical environment that people with disabilities encounter, such as lack of accessible parking, lack of appropriate curb cuts, and difficulty navigating the physical building. And I actually went to go vote, and the accessible entrance at our voting location was locked, and we actually had to call a supervisor to come drive down. So this has been an issue for us. As a community, we are proud to highlight the increased voter turnout of people with disabilities in 2020 elections, and have been encouraged by the commitment of state leadership has made to ensure people with disabilities are able to make their voices heard. We ask you that you consider our community as you move forward with this bill. Thank you all so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. Other questions, committee? I appreciate your representation of the community, and we will certainly take all input into consideration. I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you all.
We're now going to move to Mr. Bruce. Christopher Bruce. Appreciate you being here again this morning, Mr. Bruce.
Thank you, Chairman Burns. Thank you, members of the committee. It's actually a privilege to go after Charlie Member. He's one of the best advocates that we have down here at the Capitol. So I'm going to jump right into it. Christopher Bruce, Political Director of the ACLU of Georgia. Take this off. Go Dogs. Fundamentally, in our election system, Georgia's voters cast their ballot securely and legally in 3 ways. As we know, absentee by mail, 2 early in person, and on 3 election day. At its core, HB 531 makes considerable cuts to these in each forms of voting without justification. So let's look at first, when it comes to absentee by mail voting. We continue to share many of the concerns that have been raised, including new requirements to provide sensitive personal information with the application and on the ballots, and who are dealing with voters at risk of identity theft. We're discuss various unfunded mandates, like requiring security paper for ballots, and the fact that even Governor Brian Kemp, who was in quarantine for COVID-19, the Friday before the election, would not have been able to vote in the general election under the absentee timeline under this bill. Second, the cuts in this bill to early voting in person are deeply alarming. Section 18 of the bill would cut weekend voting hours in the 5 most populous counties in Georgia by 40%. Let's look at Gwinnett County, and their voters themselves would lose 2/3 of their weekend voting hours. To put this in further perspective, House Bill 531 would cut early voting access for well over 3 million active voters in the state of Georgia, and that is 41% of all voters statewide. This bill creates an impossible choice for the counties, and that's between 1, no Sunday voting at all, or 2, an extremely confusing situation of no Saturday voting the first weekend and no Sunday voting the second weekend. When nearly 400,000 Georgians of all stripes, political persuasions, ethnic backgrounds, cast their ballots on the weekend during the general election and runoff, these cutoffs cannot be justified. I'm going to say that number again, 400,000 Georgians. The bill also makes large cuts to early voting access for the federal runoffs. It would have a limited early voting in most of our runoff to 3 days. So that would be, how would the 2.1 million Georgia voters who voted in the runoff election, 3 weeks, be expected to vote in just 3 days? 2.1 million. The cascading effects of such a drastic cut to early voting access would paralyze our election system. But let me focus on especially the barriers that this bill places on election day voting. The proposal to toss out tens of thousands of election day ballots that were cast by eligible voters within their own counties of residence, within their own counties, but outside of their precinct. The justification offered for this proposal is a concern for down-ballot races is not only unwarranted given the current capabilities of Georgia's ballot marking devices to print full ballots, but the justification is also fundamentally at the odds of the constitutional right of every Georgian to be able to choose the races in which they want to vote. So in 2020, Georgia general election.
Mr. Bruce, I'd ask that you wrap up your testimony. We appreciate it, and we recognize that these are significant issues, but please help conclude, and we have some questions for you.
Absolutely. And Chairman, this may be my last time in front of the committee. I just want to thank you for the way that you've held the committee down. This is one of the most pivotal bills that have been happening down in the state legislature. This could have gone a lot worse. So I appreciate
It's not that you're pretty, it's just you're not as ugly as I thought you were.
I appreciate your leadership.
Thank you. No, from you, that's a great compliment.
I yield to any questions.
I recognize the leader for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The weekend thing, what if in there it was 2 mandatory weekend days and 2 optional that were left up to the county?
So thank you, Leader, for your comment. We're trying to get rid of the confusion that goes along with it. So we want to be able to crunch those numbers all together and see how many voters would actually be impacted by it. So,
Well, you wouldn't know across the state. You would know in a county.
correct.
So those counties would have the option to use all 4 weekend days if they so choose. But other counties that have a much less populated area down there would not have the resources or the requirements to have 2 Sundays open. That would, again, be the option that each of those counties use because of the local control that we all seem to, agree is the best way to do this. And I'm just asking, instead of a cookie cutter that's one size fits all for the state, what if we have 2 mandatory, 2 optional?
So I'm glad you brought up that point. I would still have to look at how that would affect in the counties. But I think going to your point more, appropriations. We could have that. We just need to fund the counties to be able to open up on those days.
They don't want it. They don't want to sit there to have 3 people come through on a Sunday, to have a full staff with 3 people coming through a polling precinct. I'm sorry, I will go to the next question I have. You talked about the runoff, 3 days. My understanding of in 531 with the ranked choice ballots that would go to the military overseas, that would allow us to go back to the length of time that occurred before the federal courts mandated that we extend the length of time for runoffs because of the military overseas ballots. That didn't seem to be chaotic. As a matter of fact, there was a lot of gnashing and well in the teeth when the federal decision came in to extend the length of time with a runoff to allow the military overseas ballots to get in. So I'm not sure when the 3 days piece or the where that would be a significant traumatic event on the voters to limit it to a month.
So I think we're talking about, are you just talking about the military ballots, or are you talking about the 2.1 million Georgia voters who voted in 3 weeks altogether?
I'm talking about, you said on a runoff. The reason that we have the extended time period is because of the military overseas ballots. That's the reason we have that. So if you allowed them, and the ranked choice ballots was an option that the state could have used, and we did not. That's one of the things that we're obviously talking about now, would allow us to compress, like the rest of the country does for the most part, to get back within a normal window, a month period in between the end of the race and the runoff, instead of the extended period, which is not for your voting days aren't anymore. They're just pushed further out. So you bring them in closer. All you're doing, the only real losers on that is radio stations, televisions, and newspapers.
They're not getting the ad money.
That's right.
Right.
And bless their hearts, and they got to eat too. But I'm okay with that. So I wasn't sure where you're going with that piece of it.
really going more towards the way the system's set up right now. And I understand we haven't come up with a opinion on ranked choice voting altogether, so I can't give you an official opinion for the ACLU of Georgia. But it's something that we can look into, and if we'd like to sponsor a bill next year, ACLU will work with you.
Are you going to be back? I thought you weren't going to be back.
Oh, am I fired?
No.
No.
I was going by your comments a little ago. I was disappointed when you said that. Let's do it.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Chair recognizes the President Pro Tem for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My actually, it's not a question, but it goes along the lines of the leader's final comments. When Mr. Bruce said he wouldn't be back before this committee, I thought you were implying or telling us that you were moving on to another vocation, job, location, venue, what have you. And I was going to tell you, we appreciate your contributions that you've made over the years to this body and to this process. Fine young man. Appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I greatly appreciate that. I do plan on keeping my job. I do. I'm not sure
I'll
there's
put in
gonna be any more
a good
comment.
word for you, Mr.
Right.
Bruce.
Mr. Chairman, if I may follow up.
Certainly.
There's a couple things I need to tell you about. No kidding.
All right. Chair
Senator.
recognizes Mr. The Whip, Senator Gooch.
There could be a Honda dealership for sale in Gainesville. You could buy it. But my serious question is, earlier you talked about, I think you referenced Governor Kemp could not have voted absentee under this bill provision. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, yes.
How?
Yes, thank you for the question, Senator. Under the facts that I think we all know of, Governor Kemp was in quarantine because he was exposed to COVID-19. And at that time, he had to request an absentee ballot to vote by mail. So this would limit that to the point where he would be outside that window to request an absentee ballot and receive it and be able to vote.
Because of the 11 days?
Yes.
So his quarantine came just before the election. I don't recall when that happened. But
I believe that's the facts that were reported within the paper. I don't know, Mark, Mark's shaking his head from the AJC.
So
we
can
just
you-
want to make sure that the governor is able to vote.
So what day, how many days prior to an election should the absentee ballot application be sent in? What's the magic number?
That's a great question, Senator. I would love
you
to
have a-
workshop that with the Board of Elections. But in the ACLU's viewpoint, we can have same-day registration and same-day voting. When it comes to the mail, I would love for things to be overnighted as well. We just want to make sure every
So you
Georgia
would
can vote.
advocate for a FedEx package that costs about $30 to be charged to a voter?
It's possible. Now,
Okay.
we're not going to get into budgetary items right now. We're not, but it's a dream that I think we all can get to one day.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any other questions?
What Senator Gooch just said. Whatever it costs to vote, I think it'll be worth it. If it's $30, you said, well, I don't know
Are
if
you-
my mic's
is the
on or
mic
not. She said, whatever it costs to vote, then I think it'll be worth it.
You would
It
support-
has cost more. It has cost lives for people to vote.
So you would support that for the voter to have to pay to vote, in order to vote?
If that's what it takes.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thank you, Mr. Bruce.
Thank you, Chairman Burns.
Got to go with Mr. Bruce to draft that legislation.
I appreciate
outta
you doing that, Mr. Leader.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Our next witness is Pachaya Poi Winachuk. Help me. I apologize yet again.
That's okay. We'll keep seeing each other so we can
I
keep
look forward to
practicing.
it. Thank you.
Thank you again for allowing me to testify this morning. I was also here yesterday and didn't feel like continuing to be here in a packed room, so I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Pichia Poi Winachakal, and I am an attorney with the SPLC Action Fund. I'm testifying on behalf of the SPLC Action Fund and the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, LDF, and refer the committee to our full written testimony for a more detailed statement. Many of my points were more artfully made by the voting rights advocates today and yesterday, so I only really have 2 points to make today in opposition to HB 531. First, these restrictions on absentee voting and early voting and the exacerbation of problems these provisions will have on in-person voting are entirely foreseeable. This is because the proposed restrictions are targeted at the precise methods that voters of color, voters with disabilities, rural voters, low-income voters, and student voters utilize at historic rates during the November and January elections. This bill, therefore, would have the effect of making it harder for those communities to vote. Second, because this committee knows that these provisions will disproportionately affect these voter groups, I again request that the committee undertake a racial impact analysis to study the far-reaching effect that this bill will have on voters of color. How can the committee be sure that such a bill affecting 11 million voters, the largest election reform bill that Senator Dugan noted with regards to SB 241 since 2005. How can the committee be sure that such a bill affecting these voters won't disproportionately burden voters of color? Similarly, this committee should undergo a fiscal and resource impact analysis, as these provisions stand to create enormous stresses on election administrators and election administration generally, thereby threatening the voters' ability to cast a ballot and have it counted. Briefly, you heard yesterday that from a wide range of individuals representing organizations, communities, that span the state, that these provisions will have this disproportionate impact. Chairman Fleming had the opportunity to hear a similar testimony when this bill was before the House, whereas he did not heed the advice of dozens of individuals, organizations, experts, election administrators to conduct the fiscal and racial analysis necessary to better understand the detailed impact of this bill. This committee has the opportunity to do that, to undergo the factual analysis to really understand the impact of this bill. And to hear further from the public, who clearly has a lot to say about this bill. So I ask now again, won't this committee take the time to study the fiscal and racial impact of this bill before moving it forward? Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Any questions? Seeing none, we appreciate your input.
Thanks.
Mr. Scott Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Scott Hall, and I appear here representing no one but myself, someone that's been involved in the election process this year for the first time. I've learned more about the election process than I think I ever wanted to know. I applaud your efforts on behalf of House Bill 531 to make an effort for somebody that's participated as a monitor in all the recounts, that's been on the floor of the Fulton County Warehouse, that has witnessed with my own eyes things that are extremely concerning and have caused me, a voter, to lose faith in the system. Going through college, I was the only white member of the Black Student Union, okay, and I fought for equality. And to listen yesterday to someone that says uniformity creates inequity, okay, it just cut me to my core. Uniformity creates equality. I see people of one race, and that's the human race. I want one person, one vote. I want everybody to have a voice. And a house is only as good as its foundation. And our belief in these elections, one person, one vote, is the most sacred thing we have. In this house is built on that belief. And I think you've seen by the testimony of the number of people, there are a number of people that are questioning this belief. This right to vote is more sacred than your access to your tax returns, to your access to your credit profile, to your medical history. Yet, there are two different standards. When I go to vote in person, okay, I have to show a license, and I vote in person. and they look at my license, they look at my face, and they pull me up on the computer. And in absentee by mail, there is none of that. We send certain absentee ballots to people that have voted in previous elections. They could be going to nursing homes where someone is harvesting them. If anything, we've got this reversed. We're more strict on in-person voting than we are absentee. So I applaud your efforts to try to restore faith, because there's a large number of Georgians that in fact are questioning this process, and we need to do what we need to do to restore that faith. I want people to feel like they've got access. We've got election day voting, we've got early voting, we've got vote by mail, we've got drop boxes. This state has gone, far beyond. And I appreciate and applaud everything you're doing to restore my faith and similarly situated Georgians like myself. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you for your input. Question for the witness?
I forgot
Yes,
your
sir.
name. Is it
Scott Hall. Scott Hall.
Mr. Hall. Is there anything in this bill that you think that would prevent a legal vote from being cast in Georgia?
No.
Do you see anything in this bill that would prevent a legal voter from being able to get access to a ballot in Georgia?
No.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Does the senator have a question? No. Thank you. Chair recognizes Zan Thornton. Zan Thornton. Chair recognizes Savannah Scott. Savannah Scott. The chair recognizes Bentley Hudgens. Bentley Hudgens.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I am here today to express my strong opposition against House Bill 531 and implore that you all, as our representatives and senators, to do all that you can do to make voting as accessible as possible to all eligible Georgians. Today, while some speak in racist conjecture and theories, I speak in reality and fact. I'm Bentley Hudgens. I lead the New Georgia Project Georgia Cares team for our C3 and our C4 side. As you have heard from several of my colleagues, our organization has been fighting for Georgians' access to the polls since its inception, and unfortunately, we continue that battle against House Bill 531 at a time when we should be focused on ensuring the public health needs of people in our state. My role within the organization affords me the opportunity to speak with Georgians of all across our great state that are in senior care facilities, that have their kids in child care facilities, the people who are just trying to get access to quality health care. And these are individuals just like many of us in this room who are passionate about their ability to vote, because their vote is their voice, and if they cannot vote in a free and fair election that is accessible to them, they will not be able to see the changes that they so desperately need. Through these conversations I've been able to have with these individuals, I'm able to see firsthand this need for accessible voting. And because signups were closed, I want to go ahead and open this up to some of my friends who came. So Tia, please.
I'm sorry, sir, that is not your prerogative. You
Is
have
that my
3
prerogative?
minutes, and you have a minute and a half left.
Okay.
We'll welcome
Okay.
your testimony because you
Okay.
signed up. Thank you.
Great. During the most recent general election, the New Georgia Project gave over 1,000 individual rides to the polls. Each one of these individuals had their own story on why it was challenging for them not only to get to the polls, but there are some that needed a ride just to get to the closest drop box. Simply put, voting is the cornerstone of our democracy. But at every turn, the majority party has voted for bills and advocated for policies that make it harder to register to vote, to cast a ballot, and to have that ballot counted. This legislation is a wide-ranging attack on voting rights that would jeopardize many Georgians' ability to participate in our democracy, especially those who some would consider foreigners by whoever that lady was who spoke earlier. It is disheartening that the majority party has doubled down on their determination to suppress votes and silence Georgians' voices. My hope today is that you all will think about the Georgians and the variety of situations that people may be in that could hinder their ability to vote. For some people, it's a disability. For some people, it's a lack of access to the papers that you're requiring because they're poor, they're homeless, or they're dealing with the exact match law that most targets people of color. And in thinking of these situations, I hope that you will not put your party affiliation first, but your commitment to the citizens of Georgia to ensure that each and every eligible voter has a free and fair access to their ballot. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Any questions? Seeing none. We appreciate, this concludes the witness testimony for this morning. You're not on the list and you cannot be recognized at this time. I'm sorry. Representative, you do not have standing in this committee. You do not request to speak. We welcome your written testimony, and I'm happy to chat with you after the meeting. Thank you. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your interest and passion for this issue. We recognize it is a very challenging and sensitive issue, and we're going to deal with it as deliberately and as effectively as we can. This concludes testimony on 531. I need HB 531. I need a motion to put it back on the table. I have a motion from Senator Hatchett. I need a second. Second from Senator Robertson. Without objection, 531 is placed on the table. Just as a point of information for the committee, we're working to provide the input that we've heard to make some adjustments to HB 531. We're developing a substitute that would address some of the issues and some of the challenges that we have with 531. We're working to integrate some of the legislation that this committee has heard in the past to bring to the committee an opportunity to discuss a revised bill, a substitute bill. We hope that that bill will be available to the committee late today. And if so, I'll disperse it and distribute it publicly. If it's available, we will have our regularly scheduled meeting in the morning at 8 o'clock for a hearing only on any potential substitute. We will take no action today. We'll take no action, anticipate no action tomorrow. And so we'll have an opportunity, certainly over the next 48 to 72 hours, to fully vet the legislation that might be under consideration. Are there any questions from the committee? Hearing none, motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn, second. Without objection, committee is adjourned.